Wonderful. Okay. So welcome back to Beyond Fossil Fuels, our third session, thematic session after the opening. So happy to have you here. And of course, we've heard a lot, we've seen a lot, but we have more exciting speakers presenting now. We're going to start right away. I have here right next to me, and our next speaker, Shaina Oliver, from here, from Denver, North Denver, not originally, but you live here now. And your t-shirt says it already, you're with Mom's Clean Air Force. You're also an activist for Indigenous rights, and you'll focus a lot on the health impacts of fossil fuels, but I don't want to take away too much of your presentation. You can get ready and start. I'll just start the slide share right away, and then you can either use the cursor or you can use this tool, but either way, the microphone is here on my other side. So just a second, I'll get this all ready. And then you can start your presentation anytime. Feel free to go ahead. Yeah, this is this microphone, and it's on the screen, and nothing can go wrong from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Max, and everyone for joining today. I'd like to say Yat'e, hello. I'm Shaina Oliver, tribal affiliate of the Navajo Nation, currently residing in Denver, Colorado, with my husband and 4 children. And I'm an advocate for Indigenous people's rights to sustainable access to clean air, water, sorry, the slide, and lands, as well as equitable solutions to health, education, employment, housing, and transportation. And also Mom's Clean Air Force, we acknowledge the stolen lands of many Indigenous tribes that have been impacted by racist policies, including the genocide committed through the Indian Removal Act that forcefully removed Indigenous communities from ancestral lands. And we recognize the injustices that play at the hands of environmental policies that have allowed the injustices of Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. We are on the land of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and Apache, the Lakota, the Sioux, Pueblo, the Dineh, Shoshone, Kiowa. So there's 48 tribes that once ancestrally occupied Colorado. And that's why we need to move beyond state boundaries and territories, because this was land that was shared between the communities of Indigenous communities prior to colonization. And we need to recognize that we can live together as communities, whether Indigenous or not. So I'd like to go to the next slide. So we are a community of over 1 million moms and dads united against air pollution, including the urgent crisis of our changing climate. To protect our children's health, we fight for justice in every breath, recognizing the importance of equitable solutions in addressing air pollution and climate change. Through a vibrant network of state-based community organizers, we work on national and local policy issues. Our moms meet with lawmakers at every level of government and on both sides of the political aisle to build support for equitable, just, and healthy solutions to pollution. So we consider ourselves moms partisan. Protecting children's health is a nonpartisan issue. Our EcoMadres program focuses on empowering the Latino and Latina families to advocate for clean air in disproportionately impacted communities. And our website provides many bilingual Spanish-English resources. So Moms Clean Air Force also provides specific resources for African-American communities through our community RX and Faith Forth programs. We recognize that there is a need for resources that focus specifically on how Indigenous communities and tribal lands are impacted by air pollution and climate change. So we were fortunate to be able to partner with the National Tribal Air Association to create the Indigenous People and Air Pollution in the United States fact sheet, which was released earlier this year. So I'm glad to be able to share this with everyone going forward. And I also hope that we can also have a discussion of what we are all doing to preserve clean air and healthy climate. We would also like to support our efforts. Hopefully we can find new ways to work together to ensure the health of the next 7 generations. And next slide. So this is the Indigenous fact sheet that we have on Moms Clean Air Force under resources on our website. So as an associate member also of the National Tribal Air Association and field organizer for EcoMadres and Moms Clean Air Force Colorado chapter, I am proud to introduce the Indigenous People and Air Pollution Report, a resource by the National Tribal Air Association and Moms Clean Air Force. So the National Tribal Air Association advances air quality management policies and programs consistent of the needs, interests, and unique legal status of American Indian tribes and Alaska Natives. The NTAA was founded in 2002 and is one of the nation's largest tribal membership organizations with over 150 tribal members. With 150 member tribes. The NTAA is governed by an executive committee comprised of elected representatives from each EPA region in Alaska. Currently, the NTAA is staffed by Northern Arizona University's Institute for Tribal Environmental Professions, which you can find at their site at ntaatribalair.org. It has been a privilege to have moms collaborate with NTAA. The purpose of this resource is to really acknowledge Indigenous communities and recognize the environmental impacts on tribal communities, including health impacts that relate to myself and community members disproportionately impacted by air pollution. We also hope this resource motivates all people to confront the systemic racism of the removal of Indigenous people and communities and helps people recognize how this racism relates to health disparities experienced by Indigenous people. We also wanted to highlight how tribal governments are using their sovereign rights to lead their tribes in fighting climate change and healing their ancestral lands. Indigenous people, we hold an important role in policy change and their voices are essential to this movement we are seeing across all worlds and communities. When relating to Indigenous people and healing, we must consider the past, present, and future. And we must always consider how we got here to the present situation of ecological distress and what our actions mean for the generations to come. Indigenous people have a powerful voice and we need communities to speak up with us and support the Indigenous community's right to clean air, water, and lands. Indigenous communities are the last to know of environmental impacts after already being exposed to contaminants and air toxics. Many times, Indigenous communities have been given misinformation about environmental risks. Most fossil fuel industries have already impacted tribal communities and have pushed for increased displacement of Indigenous people from their lands. This has gone on for years, starting with farming, mining, and railroads. This pattern has continued in the developments of dams, waterways, and settler encroachments, and extractive capitalism. With Indigenous culture, all things are related. It's like we're connected, like the constellations and like the spider web. We're all connected, and that's why we are seeing the disparities across Black, Latino, Indigenous, and low-income communities, which are all impacted by higher exposure to pollution, and we need to fight environmental racism. The Navajo Nation reservation lands have been exploited for uranium, coal mining, energy plants, and oil and gas development. When I was a child, I remember hearing the stories from my parents and grandmothers of how big the snowstorms used to be. And I remember as a child seeing the frogs come out of the ground after the rainy seasons. And now we hear old timers, memories of greener pastures. The Navajo Reservation it looks arid. People think it's a desert, but at once it used to hold pastures. At once they used to have many herds before the Livestock Reduction Act in the early 1900s, which during that time, they expanded oil and gas and fossil fuel industries during that time when they enacted that livestock reduction, which was targeted on Navajo, on the Navajo Reservation. So Indigenous communities we are taking action to prevent worsening climate change and to adopt changes by climate change, such as the Swinomish tribe located in coastal Washington state created an ambitious climate adaptation plan in 2010. Their plan focuses on the overall well-being of the community and is centered on restoring habitat that is essential for first foods such as salmon and clams. This tribe has also made progress in restoring wetlands and cooled salmon streams by planting trees for shade. So food sovereignty and native plants are also a concern for tribal communities where climate change will take our food sources. So health impacts in Indigenous communities. Due to the encroachment of industries and settler communities, Indigenous people experience many health issues at higher rates than the rest of the US population. By almost any measures, public health among Indigenous people lags behind public health among other groups. The life expectancy of Indigenous people is 5 years shorter than it is for other Americans. Indigenous people die at higher rates from a range of causes, including liver disease, diabetes, and respiratory diseases. Health disparities are rampant and reflect for tribal communities and where climate change will take our food sources. And but health disparities are rampant and reflect centuries of genocide, as well as persecution, discrimination, and neglect. Unfortunately, air pollution causes or exacerbates all of the major health disparities experienced by Indigenous people, making it even more urgent to improve air quality on tribal lands. Indigenous people also have the highest rates of asthma, heart disease, cancer, leukemia, mental illness, adverse birth outcomes that include developmental disabilities. So according to the US Census, 24% of American Indians and Alaska Natives have a disability compared to 19% of the general population. So birth defects are structural changes that are present at birth that can impact nearly any body part. Indigenous people experience a significantly higher occurrence of several birth defects, including cleft palate, ear defects, and insufflosal, and which is a defect of the skull and brain. Air pollution is associated with an increased risk of congenital abnormalities. Many tribes and Indigenous organizations offer cultural relevant support to children and adults with disabilities, often with the focus of thriving while living independently. Even myself was born premature, low birth weight, and with a birth defect, which my parents didn't find out until later in life, which on the reservation, we don't find out about our birth defects until we either join the military or leave the reservation and have better health systems. So a lot of us live like this, not knowing that we're missing a kidney, not knowing that we have a cleft palate, not knowing about these birth defects until we get better health care. So with these health conditions are also common on non-tribal communities that are located also near polluting industries and toxic waste sites like Suncor Refinery, like the Cherokee gas plant, that area of Commerce City area. People in those areas are experiencing similar health impacts on communities and families, which is why it's important for communities to make those connections of health impacts and air pollution. So tribal sovereignty being expressed through air programs. Tribal governments play an important role in controlling and reducing air pollution by developing tribal air programs that seek to advance air quality management policies and programs consistent with the needs and interests and unique legal status of American Indian tribes and Alaska Natives. Tribes are important partners with federal, state, and local agencies to protect ambient and indoor air quality to mitigate climate change. As a number of federally recognized tribes continue to grow, tribal air programs grow as well. According to the EPA's 1984 Indian policy, the EPA supports the role of tribal governments and will pursue the principle of Indian self-government and work directly with tribal governments on a government-to-government basis. Upholding the 1984 Indian policy is of utmost importance. As tribes grow their air programs, EPA should expand trainings for tribes on how to obtain treatment as state status. As treatment as state status authorize a tribe's treatment in a manner similar to a state for administering air quality programs. Treatment as a state status promotes tribal sovereignty and qualifies a tribe to be treated as an affected state when operating permits are used. This ensures that tribes receive notice when neighboring states issue permits to facilities that may impact air quality on tribal lands. Indigenous communities are predominantly impacted by pollution beyond their homes, often by neighboring governments. This is called transboundary pollution. It is therefore critical that Indigenous communities have the ability to review and comment on permits, rules, and regulations governing the creation of transboundary pollution. So what can community members do now? You can check out Mom's website for these resources, like our new resources on Indigenous peoples and air pollution in the United States. We would love to have your help in educating communities. We have many resources under Mom's websites, under resources. We have many videos. This month is a Native American History Month. We'll be having videos showing on our site, giving voice to Indigenous voices on Indigenous people's rights, as well as the history of their ancestral families. So that will be on Mom's website, that will be shared as well. We need to take action right now for Build Back Better and ensure that our leaders are going to fund these programs. And the Build Back Better program would support tribal funding for these type of programs for the environment, and such as air quality programs to mitigate these health problems that are going on. So that's why it's important to us as moms, as well as to support the Build Back Better letter. If you go to Mom's website, you can take action there and sign that letter. As you know, our representatives have not approved of the Build Back Better plan and only passed the infrastructure investment plan, and not, they are still weighing on that. I can understand, since there's some still investment going on in fossil fuels through these programs, but it's also allowing more funding to tribes to mitigate how to transition as well, and to provide those transitioning solutions to the community. And that's why I ask everyone to be involved in getting to speak to federal agencies that can change policy. Because with moms, our focus is on changing federal policy. And with my help, I am pushing for that state-to-state relationship with Indigenous tribes, for tribes to have that same acknowledgement and recognition, and having that same voice at the decision table, and not continually being neglected. And we need to fix these health problems that are going on, not only in tribal communities, but disproportionately impacted communities that are suffering, that are living next to these industries, that are polluting our health, our water, and really stagnating our children's growth and their ability to be better members of our community. And that really takes educating. We need to re-educate in a way that we reimagine our future, to have a better education for our children, to have that acknowledgement for their future and their sustainability with the land, the water, and the air. Thank you. And I would like to take any questions you have, and visit Mom's site to take action, stay up to date on Twitter, bug those members on Twitter, since our governments are on Twitter apparently. But bug them wherever you can. And I would like to invite Lucy to speak.
Thank you for presenting. We will immediately switch over if you're fine. And I'll just hand the microphone over to Lucy. And so we can move it a lot, and you can attach it to your coat.
Right here.
Yeah, that's great.
There we go.
Oh. And then just
there we go.
Just hold it.
Okay.
And it's working, so you don't need to scream. And you get the slideshow over there. It's already up. So I can't really introduce you other than that you're also an activist, and you're also having your first experiences with politics or running for office.
Yes, sir.
So thank you for joining us here today, and the floor is yours.
Gracias. Hola, buenas tardes. Good afternoon. My name is Lucy Molina, and thank you so much. I'm very humbled and thankful to be here. So I just, kind of updated my little slide thing. Maybe here we go.
I moved this. Okay, sorry. Here we go.
There we go.
Okay, sorry.
And this is a little bit about me. I'm really here as myself, as Lucy Molina. I am very proud and honored, actually, to be working and organized in a lot of events with 350 Colorado, with Moms Clean Air Force, with Conservation Colorado, also with a lot of leading organizations here in Colorado and nationwide. So I'm just a mom. That's why I'm here with the EcoMadres and, Moms Clean Air Force today with 350. We're just a community person from the hood. So before we start, can I ask you guys something? Can we all stand up and stretchy kind? Let's reach up to the sky, y'all. Let's reach up to the sky. If you guys want to touch the ground, you guys are, because this is what we're trying to do, you know what I mean? I do do the washing machine, y'all. You could do the washing machine, stretch it, just to get us going. Because I know I've been sitting there a lot, but gracias. So again, Lucy Molina de Commerce City. So this is some of the things that I've done here. I'm just a community organizer. Again, I shared who I've been working with, and most recently with Promotora with Cultivando. Also, it's a local organization in Commerce City. So I live in Commerce City, which is one of the most polluted cities and communities in the state of Colorado, along with 80216, which is where I grew up, Swansea area. Now, I'm also, I did an attempt, a political candidate and an advocate for clean air and water. because we do not have drinking water in Commerce City. Okay, now 2021, the richest, most powerful country in the world. And in Commerce City, we have no drinking water. We have our air is polluted and our soil is polluted. So, you know, in this day and age, that's pretty much unacceptable. You know, even hearing what Shaina is speaking about the indigenous communities, come on. I mean, no, that's unacceptable. Okay, which is, I've been actually very blessed to be able to work with the Just Transition team with 350 Colorado the last few years. And I've learned so much of how frontline communities like mine, that is where Just Transitions need to begin. You know, just like, you know, you were sharing in Craig, like Just Transitions must begin in communities like ours, not only in Colorado nationwide, but worldwide, right? I always share this, you know, even in the industry, it's like a mafia, right? I mean, coming from Mexico, you know, where it's actually American corporations that are exploiting and stealing our resources at every level in third world countries, which forces us to immigrate, right? And then the other side is, you know, some people are not happy about that, but we consume, right? We still consuming, and that it impacts those third world countries like my families, the ranchos and the farmers up in Mexico, that is my family. But we're here now, right? You could probably go to the next one here. I'm also a board member for the Black Parents United Foundation, which is an African-American foundation that I'm happy to be part of, because it's the people of color, the African-American and the Latino community that is so, it's not included. Okay, so this is just a little bit about me. She talked about environmental racism, and I really want to bring it to the table of what it looks like, okay? Because I call them Band-Aids. These are parks around, this is me, of course. Some are me, that's, the top one is the refinery, Suncor, right by my house. These are parks. There's also the Purina, which is in Swansea, which these are all surrounded in our communities, right? And again, people of color, the group there, they're my Mexican dancers, right? We have the Folklorico, Ballet Folklorico. We're actually dancing in Commerce City when Suncor had just blew it. Like there was all kinds of like yellow gunk and we can smell it. Like they were practicing and dancing outside. And here is the middle one here with the mask and the black. That's me working out with the group of Commerce City is telling us quality community for a lifetime. They're telling us to eat healthy, work out, do these things, but let's go to a stinky ass park and exercise right there, Zumba, right? And then these are some pictures of last year's, y'all remember last year's fires? That is in Rifle over there in the far right up there, or left, your left, my right. That's Rifle. So these are just like going down the highway last summer here in I-25. And that is like really our reality right now. And that is scary for a mom. It's very scary. You could go to the next one, Mika. So this is who it's impacted, my family. It's impacted my community and my family. These are my children, you know, that's my group, my dance girls up at Fairfax Park at the climate strike that we did a few years ago with 350 Colorado. My grandma, this is en gran memoria de una gran madre, mi abuelita, mi grandma. That's she died of leukemia, right? And my children, my nieces and nephews, developmental issues. Yeah, they were born at 5 days old. They had to have surgery. My nephew Elijah is also a community speaker that's been advocating a youth for 350 actually, and Mom's Clean Air Force. They've been advocating because he's got asthma. And it's very hard to him to come and visit my mom where I live, because then he gets sick on us. And it's scary because I'm like, mijo, you can't come because I don't want you to get sick on my watch. And it's scary, you know, because, you know, he's still my family. And that's my son. He plays the saxophone, you know, he needs his hair to play the saxophone, and he plays the guitar. So we're musicians, we're in the music industry, right? My mom's also a singer. I put their love because, you know, that's really what we need is love to be able to change and to be able to transition. So you could go to the next one, Mija. This is just a little bit of the work that we've been doing here. Okay, we talked about environmental racism, Band-Aids, I call them. And from 2019 to 2021, we seen a Suncor settlement which I firsthand experienced like what environmental racism is, even at a political level, legislation, and these band-aids that they give us when they find the criminal $9 million. And out of those $9 million, $5 million was given back to them. And $2.6 million was given to the impacted communities, right? This is what they send me all throughout summer. Suncor listens. They were sending all kinds of stuff during the, according to the, I guess the fine, right, Micah, that they had to do this. They had to reach out to the community. They had to do some type of outreach. So they send us little postcards, right? Nobody came to talk to me at my house and say, hey, Lucy, are you okay? What can I do? Nothing. But that money went back to them. That's why I put, how can we help? Are you an impacted citizen? I am, right? Support impacted communities like mine, right? And I always say with this situation that justice is not charity, okay? Because this is what they give us. They give us a charity. They give us a $2.6 million pocket change, compared to what they make a minute, because that's probably what they make a second, you know what I mean? And just transitions that need to begin in communities like ours. You can go to the next one, Mika. So then this is my last slide here. So this is why I always advocate to educate to regulate. And I just put some thoughts there. Where the problem is, that's where the solution lies, which is us, the people. We are not included. We are never included. I always say, and people know me by saying this, that I was not invited. I crashed the party, okay? Just like today, right? I crashed the party because that's how important it is to me and to my communities to also be able to be included in the transition, because there's denial in our communities. Therefore, and we have to accept what's going on, like the work, the employment, the sicknesses, the health impact, that's denial, we deny. But then, you know what? Yeah, I have cancer. Yeah, I'm going to die anyway. I got to accept it. But why? You know what I mean? There has to be outreach and education. At least in low-income communities like mine, we got to bring it down a notch. Like if a third grader can understand it, my grandma can understand it, then we are transitioning, okay? There's the environmental racism, again, that we've been facing at every level, from the district to the city, to the county, to the state and federal level. There is environmental racism all over that, which doesn't allow us to transition. So then inclusion and that lack of, again, that's how me and Shaina started working together, was because we were probably the only brown people in a room of 100, usually white men, that are controlling my future. And I was like, that's not gonna happen anymore. I didn't know those spaces were available for me until people like Micah, like Moms Clean Earthers or 350 included me, right? To say, hey, this is where you can bring your voice. Again, the lack of sharing of knowledge, the lack of funding, and the lack of proper leadership, which is why I ran for office. The lack of funding is, I always say, corporations and industries, nonprofits, they found the pot of gold at the end of taxpayer rainbow in communities like ours, because the resources are there. We're robbed at them. They take them from us, right? So we are not allowed to be able to do any of these things. I always say also the options in energy and transportation. If you need a burrito, if you want to get a McDonald's or whatever, a burger, a burrito, a taco, do you have to go to McDonald's? There's Smashburger, there's all these other places. There's options to get everything, even a bottle of water, a soda, Pepsi. There's also options, not in energy, because it's a mafia. Those options have always been there, but our government or our greedy corporate leaders, I guess, that are hiding these things from us, have not allowed us to transition. Now, again, I always say just transitions must begin in impacted and exploited communities and countries, like ours. It costs money to save the planet. At least personally for me, I'm broke. I'm sorry, but I can't help you save the planet because I'm poor. So what can you do to help me? What can you help a single mother that has been impacted with so many health impacts and racism and economic roadblocks? How are you going to be able to transition someone like me? Because you know what? Let's just say 99% of the communities are in that situation. So My name is Lucy Molina from Commerce City here in Denver, Colorado. And thank you for this opportunity to speak. I hope we can transition together, not leaving anybody behind. Gracias.
With me, I don't have that many, but you
There you
can
go.
of course continue the conversation with a desk microphone. And I want to have a quick transition, just flying transition to Julia Guarino, and a very, very nice surprise without slides. So you can just come up here and start right away. I hope you're ready. It's been a wait. And if you need some space here on the, I can scoot a little bit. I think we fit together. That's teamwork. I'll attach your microphone here again. And I hope everything is ready. So thank you so much for joining us. I didn't mention, I just said your name, but you're coming from an organization. It's called Four Corners Rising. And of course, to me, living on the East Coast, I was like, what four corners? But I imagine here everybody knows what this refers to. Nevertheless, we have people on the Zoom who are not from here and even in the room here. So maybe you explain the whole story a little bit and we'll be listening. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Max. Yeah, thank you, Max and Kokosita for inviting me and the Alliance Center for hosting us. And thank you, Shaina, for the land acknowledgements. I want to also acknowledge that we're meeting on stolen Indigenous lands here in the U.S. We always are, but we are in the U.S. Yeah, this is a great opportunity to connect with folks around the world working on similar issues. So as Max said, I'm Julia Guarino. I am an attorney by training, and I'm the founding director of this new little nonprofit called Four Corners Rising. Prior to founding Four Corners Rising, I was an attorney for the Navajo Nation, the Bears Ears Intertribal Coalition, and the Western Environmental Law Center. And so while I've been thinking about and seeing issues related to just transition for tribal communities from multiple angles for the past 10 years or so, I want to be clear that I'm not a tribal member, so I'm not speaking for tribes, and I have a necessarily limited understanding of how these issues actually play out in communities. So yeah, I was going to talk about the Four Corners region. So the Four Corners region is, of the United States, encompasses the high deserts and mountains that make up the geography of southwestern Colorado, northwestern New Mexico, northwestern Arizona, and northeastern New Mexico and Arizona, southeastern Utah. So they all come together in a square there. It's a subregion of the Colorado Plateau, which is an 80 million acre uplift that stretches from the Mogollon Rim, which is just north of Phoenix in Arizona, to just south of the Wyoming border in northern Utah. And it goes east-west from the border of Nevada to the western foot of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. So a fairly large area. In the Four Corners subregion, the majority of the land is cold desert that's about 5,000 feet or higher above sea level, and receives the majority of its only 10 inches or less of precipitation each year in snow. The remainder of the region's lands are mountain peaks, which is where most of the region's precipitation falls as snow, and also some deep canyons, which are hotter, drier desert climates. The Four Corners region is surrounded by larger population centers, the larger population centers of the states in which it lies, but the region itself is very rural and sparsely populated. The region also encompasses the Hopi tribe, Navajo Nation, Southern Ute, New Mountain Ute, and Zuni tribes reservations. The surrounding Colorado Plateau also contains 27 additional Indian reservations. As a result, the region's population is about 42% American Indian, which is compared to 0.8% of the overall US population. The region is also more economically impoverished than the US as a whole, with about 24% of the population living in poverty as compared to 14% of the US population overall. There are a lot of outdoor recreational opportunities in the region, and recreation is a cornerstone of the economies in two of the region's larger towns, Durango, Colorado, and Flagstaff, Arizona. For the majority of the region, however, mining and energy extraction is the primary industry. So while the region's isolation presents some challenges in terms of economic development, there are some efforts underway, and there have been recent reports about the region sort of shifting toward tourism and recreation for economic growth. Like in other regions that are reliant on fossil fuels, the economy has been very boom and bust, and that's part of why there's so much poverty in this region, amongst other things, including colonialism. There hasn't been any specific study on the economic drivers and needs in tribal communities, although the Colorado Plateau Foundation, which works in this region with tribal communities, recently released a report that describes a vision for an Indigenous-led economy and focuses on 4 specific needs: food security through sustainable agricultural processes, protection of clean and safe water for all dependent life forms, preservation of languages, and protection of sacred places. So just some background on what's happening right now in terms of the fossil fuel energy economy. So in late 2019, the Navajo Generating Station, which is a 45-year-old coal-fired power plant, ceased production. The plants and the coal mines that fed it were central components of both the Hopi tribe and the Navajo Nation's economies, as well as some of the border towns, including around those nations. It was located on the Navajo Nation. The coal plant's closure resulted in the loss of several hundred well-paying jobs held by tribal members, many of whom were the sole wage earners in their families with few other employment options in the region because it's so rural and undeveloped. The tribal governments also faced massive losses in the face of the closures. Coal revenue constituted 83% of the Hopi Nation's annual budget, and a smaller but still very significant percentage of the Navajo Nation's government budget. So obviously this severely impacts those tribes' abilities to engage in governance of their communities and reservations. The San Juan Generating Station, which is another coal plant on the east side of the Navajo Nation, is scheduled to close in 2022, which will cause further revenue losses and job loss in tribal communities and in the border town of Farmington, New Mexico in particular. So in a scenario that plays out in rural impoverished communities across the country, those who have borne the brunt of the environmental harms of the plant's legacies and the accompanying coal mines legacies are also forced to bear the costs of its closure. So the Four Corners states and tribal nations are undergoing dramatic changes to their energy and electricity infrastructure as a result of this shift. At Four Corners Rising, we believe that if the needs and interests of low-income communities are placed at the center of environmental and economic policies during this transition, there's potential to transform the Four Corners area into a just, equitable, and sustainable region. But without such resources anchored in the community, the risk is high that low-income families will once again be left behind by rapid economic change. So to turn to Four Corners Rising and what we're doing, in early 2020, I co-founded this organization with my friend and mentor, Professor Sarah Krakoff, who's now serving as Deputy Solicitor for Parks and Wildlife at the U.S. Department of Interior, which is wonderful, under Deb Holland, who is also wonderful. So this organization has a mission of assisting the Four Corners region and to rapidly adjust to the changing economy. Our work is focused in northwestern New Mexico at this point, with the goal of addressing community disruption caused by coal plant closures and mine closures, and the contraction of the oil and gas industry, which is happening at the same time in this region for economic reasons. So we're doing this by using the tools of equity to connect respectful resources to the community in ways that honor culture and tradition and address interjurisdictional challenges while improving quality of life for all. And to sort of elaborate on the interjurisdictional challenges of this region, as I mentioned, there are tribal communities. There's a lot of public lands as well. So, the state, of course, own land, and in places, especially in western New Mexico, there are areas of the region that are checkerboarded. So there are sort of different sovereigns that are in charge of different pieces of land that are adjacent, which makes planning across the region in a meaningful way pretty difficult. In terms of the tribal communities, obviously they're dealing with massive economic disruption, and so having the capacity to engage in interjurisdictional dialogue is pretty challenging. So the board of this organization is half Native, half non-Native. All of our members have extensive experience working in this region on related issues. And so we're a diverse group of interjurisdictional experts who are aiming to create systemic change. And we recognize a need for urgency in the face of this imminent regional economic and environmental disruption that we're experiencing. And so we're hoping to help achieve a sustainable economy, right past harms, and protect people and their environment in a community-focused way. So I'll just conclude by saying, we are, we're new and we're sort of wrestling with this issue, and I think there aren't great models for doing this in a really productive way, particularly in a region like this where we're looking at this interjurisdictional challenge of different communities trying to work together. And so this challenge of interjurisdictional collaboration is real, and I think, from our perspective, we need to strike the right balance between federal and state governments investing in tribal communities, and it needs to go that way, right? Sort of given the history of the situation, in order to allow tribal communities to catch up in terms of basic infrastructure like clean water, electricity, roads, broadband, public buildings, you name it. While at the same time respecting the tribe's sovereignty and decision-making and jurisdictional control. So this means money invested in tribal communities, but it also means things like the state agreeing not to engage in dual taxation of businesses located on reservations, which they do right now. And this must be with the aim of acknowledging and addressing historic failures to invest in tribal communities appropriately, and trying to make the playing field more level so that outside businesses are able to invest in tribal communities if the tribe desires that they do. So I live in Taos, New Mexico, which is also a small rural community. And we have lots of discussions locally about how economic development needs to be in alignment with community needs and desires, which other folks have talked about today. And so, yeah, I guess I want to just close by saying we all deserve to live in communities with modern functional infrastructure, and for the community to be able to dictate how that community will grow in the ways that are appropriate to the community itself and to the culture of that community. So it will look really different in different places. So thanks, everyone.
Oh, there it is. So before we go into the discussions, I want to show another video because we do have another technical issue. Technical issue is maybe understatement. So the mayor for the last city, Spremberg, Herntier, she actually had to go into an emergency county or municipal meeting because of COVID, because of the rising case numbers that went into the late evening. So she told me that she's very sorry she cannot join. Maybe you've seen, the case numbers in Germany are going back up again, but what we do have is a video. The video is in German, but has English subtitles. So this is bad news and good news. So the subtitles, they're not professionally done, so they're a little bit off, but I think you can get the meaning of everything. That's at least my hope. So it's a video about and with Christine Herntier and the city of Spremberg. And I hope, Dineh, if you can check if it's also coming onto the Zoom, which would be, of course, ideal. So here's now our virtual visit from Spremberg in Lusatia.
Schönen guten Tag, mein Name ist Herntier. Ich bin Bürgermeisterin der Stadt Spremberg seit Februar 2014 und gerade wiedergewählt für weitere 8 Jahre.
Okay, I see this does not have the subtitles, so I'm going to translate as we go. So, yeah, I did the subtitles on YouTube and then you can download, but I wasn't sure if that would come down right. I thought I had it. Maybe it's a different file version. Anyway, so she's just been reelected, and that's actually a very interesting story for those who know Germany. So we just had elections in September, so September 26th, and she was up for her next term, and her terms are 8 years long. So it's a very long term. It's one term, 8 years. So she did not get the absolute majority, so she had to go into a runoff election on October 10th, and she beat a far-right candidate on October 10th. So she's just been reelected for another 8 years, which is quite a lot of time.
Dieses Amt. Ich war als Vertreterin der Lausitzer Kommunen in der Deutschen Kommission für Wachstum, Strukturwandel und Beschäftigung.
So if you remember this, and maybe you did not fully hear this because Christian Hauenstein's presentation did not really translate very well into the room. So in Germany, there was a commission for structural change, growth, and employment. That's a very long term. So the short word for it is the Coal Commission, because it was about the coal exit. And she was an official member of it with 57 other people. And she represented not just Spremberg, which is very small, but the whole region. So the whole Lusatia region.
Der sogenannten Kohlekommission. Und gemeinsam mit meinen 57 Kolleginnen und Kollegen, Bürgermeisterinnen und Bürgermeistern, sind wir auch jetzt und auch zukünftig sehr aktiv in diesem Thema und mit diesem Thema beschäftigt.
So she says, of course, the commission ended, but they're all still very active on the topic of just transition, and they're still working together on it. And here in the background, you see this is actually the open pit mine, the open cast mine near Spremberg. So it's really, I mean, it's not next door, but it's very close to where her city is.
Meine Themenschwerpunkte sind die direkte Betroffenheit vom Kohleausstieg in Deutschland.
So she wanted to talk to you about the direct impacts of the coal exit for Germany. And these structures here, these are the open cast mining structures that move the earth from one end to the other. So these are the largest machines, I think, that there are.
Was bedeutet das für Kommunen, die wirklich im Revier ansässig sind und wo der Ausstieg aus der Kohleverstromung tatsächlich stattfindet und gravierende Folgen hat?
So what does the coal exit mean for municipalities and communities? What does it actually mean for them in terms of impact? So basically what we talked about earlier, a lot here on the Colorado side. So that's her focus.
Ein weiterer Schwerpunkt wird sein, mit welchen gesellschaftlichen Herausforderungen haben wir ohnehin zu kämpfen im Revier hier und wie wirken sich aktuelle politische Entscheidungen oder Richtungswechsel auf die politische Landschaft in den Kommunen aus?
So another issue is, of course, there are some developments happening anyway, regardless of the coal exit, like economic developments, demographic, and she's mentioning political developments. And she doesn't say it explicitly, but of course, it's also the question about political extremism or disparities. So Yeah, that's also an important topic for
Und
her.
was bedeutet das für die Arbeit der Mandatsträger und der ehrenamtlich tätigen Abgeordneten in unseren kommunalen Parlamenten? Und
So she also mentions herself. What does this structural change or the just transition mean for all the people who are doing the work in running city halls, in running these local parliaments, these local offices that are usually, if paid, very little pay, but very often it's also voluntary. So what does it mean for them?
ein weiterer Schwerpunkt schon die ganze Zeit lang ist, wie stellt sich die Stadt Spremberg und wie stellt sich die ganze Region auf? Was sind die Zukunftsfelder? Wie sehen wir die Lausitz nach dem Kohleausstieg?
And then, of course, what's the future for the whole region? How's it going to continue? What's the next industries or
Spremberg ist eine brandenburgische Kleinstadt mit knapp 23.000 Einwohnern. Wir befinden uns unweit der Grenze zu Polen.
So Spremberg really is small, 23,000 people, and it's very close to the border to Poland. And I know already what she's going to say next. So she's in a peripheral situation because they're not connected to any major metropolitan area.
Wir haben also eine Randlage. Die Stadt Spremberg liegt mitten im Lausitzer Revier.
And Spremberg is in the middle of the Lusatia mining region.
Die Stadt Spremberg ist schwer davon geprägt, dass es in der Umgebung bis in die 90er Jahre hinein 14 Tagebaue gegeben hat. Und
so until the 1990s, there were 14 open cast mines in the region. And now there's just a handful, but there's still a few running. I think 3 or 2, but yeah. So
die ganze Landschaft ist umgepflügt worden.
And the whole landscape has been remodeled basically or transformed through that.
Es ist jetzt aber so, dass es hier eine sehr liebliche Landschaft geworden ist, eine sehr schöne Landschaft, eine sehr naturnahe Landschaft.
And she says, but it has become a very beautiful, a very lovely and nature-oriented landscape.
Aber wir sind auch fernab der Metropolregionen und es wird eine der größten Herausforderungen sein, das zu ändern, damit wir an den Chancen, die es zweifelsohne geben wird, auch gebührend teilhaben können.
So she said, this is all very nice. There are, of course, opportunities in the future, but it will be very difficult to seize these opportunities because of their position in Germany.
Sind als Stadt Spremberg genauso wie die ganze Lausitz davon geprägt, dass wir einen dramatischen demografischen Wandel haben.
So Spremberg is undergoing a dramatic demographic change.
Seit 1990 30% unserer Bevölkerung, insbesondere der jungen Leute, verloren.
So since 1990, they lost over 30% of their population, mostly young people.
Die wegen einem dramatischen Arbeitsplatzabbau die Region verlassen haben, nach Westdeutschland, aber auch in die ganze Welt.
And they left because of the jobs being gone, and they left for West Germany, but also all other countries. And
das Ergebnis der Kommission für Wachstum, Strukturwandel und Beschäftigung zeigt, dass es in Deutschland möglich war, leider formuliere ich in der Vergangenheit, zu einem der brennendsten Themen einen Prozess aufzusetzen, der es überhaupt erst ermöglicht hat, einen großen gesamtgesellschaftlichen Kompromiss zu finden.
So the Coal Commission was resulted, basically it was a process that was unique in the sense of enabling a whole society discussion about how to approach this with everybody involved, municipalities, power companies, and to give this all a structure where people could engage together.
Das ist in dem Abschlussbericht der sogenannten Kohlekommission nachzulesen.
And I don't know if there's an English version, but this is all then led to the final report, the recommendations. So the commission didn't make decisions. They only provided recommendations to the federal government, but those were actually picked up.
Der Prozess selbst wurde sehr mutig aufgesetzt, dass man die große Politik außen vor gelassen hat.
And she says the process was very bold because they left out the big politics. So there were no party line representatives on board.
Wir haben nicht nur voneinander alle gelernt, sondern wir haben eine echte gegenseitige Wertschätzung aufgebaut und wir haben uns alle diesem Ziel verpflichtet gefühlt, was uns ja die Bundesregierung mit dem Einsetzungsbeschluss auf den Weg gegeben hat.
And they didn't just all learn from each other, but they actually really connected and engaged with each other. And actually, she says that was also the mission that they've been given by the federal government to collaborate, to actually work together. And she said they really succeeded in that.
So bin auch ich für die Region, ich muss es ja in der Region vertreten, sehr zufrieden gewesen mit diesem Kompromiss und mit diesem Abschlussbericht.
And she formulates this in past tense. So she says, so I have been very, very satisfied too with the outcomes and with the results of this process.
Das geht aber gerade alles den Bach runter.
And now she says, that's all going down the drain currently.
Alle Aspekte, die mit einem Kohleausstieg in Deutschland verbunden sind, wurden in diesem Bericht berücksichtigt.
So she's going back now to the actual report and she says all aspects of the coal exit were discussed and evaluated.
Wie bekommen wir zukünftig eine sichere Energieversorgung? Wie bleibt es bezahlbar? Welche Maßnahmen müssen für die betroffenen Regionen veranlasst werden?
So she says it covered both what happens in terms of energy security or security of supply, affordability of energy, but then also any measures necessary to support the regions where coal is leaving.
Was ist nötig in Richtung Stärkung der Wirtschaft und die Teile Energie und Strukturwandel wurden zusammengebracht und wir haben uns einstimmig darauf verständigt.
And the special thing was, she says, to bring together the energy transition discussion and the structural change discussion, so the social aspects, the people aspect. And she said, we all agreed on it unanimously, but
fast einstimmig, eine Gegenstimme gab es.
So almost there was one vote against it, but if you look at it with 58 members, it's a pretty solid consensus.
Dass es das Jahr 2038 sein kann für Deutschland.
And now it's interesting how she formulates this, because she says the recommendation of the commission said that 2038 can be the coal exit date for Germany. Not that it has to be, but so it was a bit more lighter in the wording, not so decisive. But 2038 was the year number that was the result of this whole process, what was also basically then picked up by federal level politics, and then also is the number that all the utilities are working with currently.
Mit einem großen wissenschaftlichen Hintergrund. Jetzt im Zuge des Wahlkampfes in Deutschland für eine neue Bundesregierung spielt das alles offensichtlich keine Rolle mehr.
And she says now with the campaigning, and of course in Germany it's post-campaigning, but they're trying to form a government. And she says all these agreements, the consensus has been invalidated.
Es wird nur mit Jahreszahlen jongliert und jetzt kommt auf einmal die Jahreszahl 2030 ins Spiel.
And people are throwing year numbers like bidding, and now people are talking about 2030.
Und so habe auch ich wieder viele Fragen. Wie soll das bitte schön gehen? Was bedeutet das für die Reviere, für die Menschen und was bedeutet das für ganz Deutschland? Ich bin gespannt, wer diesmal die Antwort darauf geben wird. Ich freue mich natürlich, dass sich das Lausitzer Revier.
So she says, now she has a lot more new questions. Everything has been reopened and she doesn't know who's going to find the answers now because the commission is concluded. It's no longer in operation. So we'll see, she says. And she says, but she's very happy to be invited here.
Bei dieser interessanten Veranstaltung vertreten darf. Es zeigt sich, dass jetzt sind wir in den Vereinigten Staaten, aber wir haben aus vielen Ländern der ganzen Welt Anfragen dazu. Wie macht ihr das hier in Deutschland?
So she says now, of course, she's speaking to people in the United States, but she gets requests and inquiries from all over the planet asking, how are you doing this in Germany? How does it work? What's the process like?
Und wie macht ihr das in der Lausitz? Also es ist für mich und für meine Bürgermeister, Kolleginnen und Kollegen eine große Ehre. Danke für die Einladung zu dieser Veranstaltung.
Yeah, that was the video. She says, thank you for inviting me. It's of course very unfortunate that she couldn't be here in person now, but I hope that you enjoyed the video a little bit. We're already over time, so we are at 1:03, but we can add a few minutes because we didn't have Q&A after the last speakers. So we can take these questions now, both from the Zoom and also from in the room. And I just want to open this right away. If you have any comments or questions, also, I want to invite the speakers from earlier to join in with their views and commentaries. We want to keep it to maximum 15 minutes. Everybody's a little bit exhausted. And we have some lunch waiting here. Hope the people on Zoom have something to look forward to as well. Do we have questions on the Zoom, Danny? No questions on the Zoom. Do we have questions in the room here or commentary? Yes, so you know where the microphone is. Try to get closer to a microphone or just talk towards it. That would work too.
I have questions for the speakers. Wonderful women over here that talked about some of the equity issues and on tribal lands. Had several questions, so I don't know. I mean, we had three people, and I'm supposed to ask one question anyway. I think what was really in my mind mostly was how are your groups, your communities using spirituality and cultural values to bring hope, to combat the sense of powerlessness and to address depression. You know, just listening to all these stories is very hard. You know, it's very hard mentally and spiritually for me. And so is that something that's really essential and integrated into all the work that you're doing is really that emphasis on spirituality and mental health and how that can absolutely bring, you know, a sense of identity, a sense of place, and bring hope to people, because this is such a tough issue in many, many ways.
Thank you for asking that.
Oh, yeah. Do you want a microphone?
As an Indigenous mom and being from the Navajo Nation, being Dineh, we have a strong belief of walking in beauty Hajon, which is basically walking in prayer and ceremony. So many tribes have different versions of this type of spiritual pathway, and also the theology of which one do you feed the most. That type of spirit feeding. Are you gonna feed the good side of your spirit, or are you gonna feed the evil side of your spirit that has a lot of resentment and just hurtful things on that side? Versus the spiritual side, it's asking you to walk in beauty and to be in relations with all things, acknowledging the elements around you. And a lot of indigenous tribes have that belief of respecting plants and animals and insects, and respecting them as relatives to us, as a partnership in a living community, that we couldn't exist without them, and nor could they exist without us, vice versa. And right now we don't have that concept right now in our colonial way of thinking and progressiveness that we speak so much about. Progressiveness is only so good, but if it doesn't acknowledge like indigenous knowledge, like the EPA goes respects traditional ecological knowledge from tribes, and that traditional ecological knowledge is being in relation with the lands, and acknowledging those relationships that we had as indigenous people in our communities. And for me, it being Dineh is to walk in beauty, to have my mind that way, and to not stray from that pathway. To stray from that pathway is to live in neglect, and to not be mindful of the next generations, or to not be mindful of my neighbor. So those things are what plays in my mind. To me, this is a spiritual pathway for me, following this direction, because it's not every member in my community is forthcoming in speaking about these issues, or let alone speaking about your own issues with developmental problems and those disabilities in our communities. Mental illness is also on the rise. I heard people speak about suicide, and I had mentioned that, like, when we're living in a place where we want to disconnect ourselves from nature, and we want to see ourselves something better than the plants, animals, and bugs that we don't recognize or acknowledge that they're part of the life that we live, and we need them. We need germs. There's little bugs that have a community on our body that we can't get rid of or see, and we have to be mindful that there's some things that we can't change. Like, we thought we can change the way our living. The US government thought they could bring indigenous communities out of poverty, of what they misunderstood self-governance as poverty, because we didn't have these certain things that this US government wanted out of us, which was all fraud, because all they wanted was our land for resources in real estate. They saw a check for themselves and didn't see what they were taking away from future generations. And this is what the concept of tribes have been telling colonialisms and settlers, is that you thinking you can own property and take fossil fuels and think you benefit from it, you're taking from the future. And in that theology, I connect to how the snake will consume its own relatives, will consume its own children, versus the bear will protect and hunt for their community, for their children. So bears have that mind of protection and hunting and gathering and taking responsibility as a mother, versus a snake will consume everything around it and even its own. And that's what we're living today. We have to pick from those two roles. Are we going to be protector and hunter and gatherer again, or are we just going to keep living like we can consume everything like the snake does. And that's not a lovely sight to see, but that's what we're living today with this industry of consuming and the falsehood of that we can take resources to benefit from, when we're not being mindful that we're consuming the future. We're consuming the children of the future and their resources and their sustainability and their right to clean air, water, and lands, and their right to protection and health. And we have policies that state they're going to protect our environment and public health, but obviously they're not doing it because they have too many loopholes through these environmental racist policies that create these loopholes for industry. So to me, this is a spiritual pathway. And for many of my Indigenous sisters and brothers that are fighting the same movement, it's a spiritual pathway for us, because for me as a Dineh woman, I'm trying to walk in the path of beauty. I don't want to walk in a selfish world where I ignore myself and my family. So thank you for asking that.
Thank you, Shaina. And now it's like perfect timing. So I think you just finished the main messages. Thank you so much. I hope this kind of at least touches on, I know you said you had a number of questions. I'm sorry, we probably can't take them all because I really tried to finish at 1:15, but I want to kind of wrap this up not in a very quick way. Because we still have some people on Zoom. So I hope if the Zoom people do have a comment or a question, please do so. Otherwise, we'll of course share materials afterwards. Feel free to engage with us. I want to ask you all to thank also Brenna and Dirk Schultz for making this possible today. And of course, all our speakers for joining us. Even the speakers who couldn't join us, because it wasn't that they didn't want to, it's just still very challenging. You know, there's 8 hours time difference with Germany, and the mayors specifically are very active in all kinds of emergencies currently, unfortunately, still, hence this masking thing. But I want to thank all of you for joining. I'm glad that Christian Hauenstein could join us. I know he was there for a lot of the sessions, but I think he's gone now. Otherwise, I would call, oh, Christian is here. Christian, if you want to say something to the group, you can do that now. Yeah, I said that I allowed him to talk. I think he's here. Great. Christian, can you hear us?
Yes, sure.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. I know it's pretty late in Germany, and I just wanted to thank you. I know you presented and we mostly missed your presentation. So this was pretty embarrassing on our end. I think on Zoom it worked probably. We'll see that later. But if you want to say a few more things towards the end here, because we really cut you off in a bad way when our internet went down.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I kind of like this diversity of insights, and I think that kind of gives a very good picture of what kind of problem we're dealing with here. One thing I wanted to add also, hearing Christine Herntier from Spremberg, I guess one very important thing is to not wait and see what will happen, but rather take proactive steps, because that's what we've seen in Germany as well, that especially in western parts of Germany where the coal exit in that sense of hard coal mining was taking place already, or was already thought of like decades ago, and university towns were built up, etc. Those cities are so much better off than places where nothing was really done than just continued coal mining. And now the companies are just pulling out. I know, like, I mean, I don't know. There are probably some responsible companies as well out there as well in that sector, but we have seen too often that well, they get, somehow make deals to become bankrupt, and then the pensions are gone. The companies have their profits on the side. There's not much care taken of the land, etc. So be proactive and address the issue of transition that will come anyway in advance, and not wait until maybe some beneficial planner will come and do things. You've seen the numbers for Germany. I think it's hard to imagine that all over the world, for every job we lose, we'll spend about 1 to 2 million, just one job in structural change measures. If we would sum that up, I think, well, we would be talking about completely different numbers than what we're talking now, with like all measures around the world going on addressing climate change. So yeah, there's still a lot to do, but yeah, looking forward to the next couple of events the next days. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Christian. And now, last but not least, and feel free to speak into the microphone. Thank you, Dirk Schulz.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, thanks a lot to all those participants for all your presentations, for your discussions. I think that was very wonderful. I learned a lot, especially I learned a lot, I think, as a newcomer here in the United States. One thing that maybe was a bit short was this comparison between the United States, Colorado, and Germany, due to some technical issues, I would say, and due to the travel ban, which ended yesterday. So I would try to make maybe 3 points to finish all this event here a bit up. 3 points. First of all, honesty. Second, participation. And thirdly, political power. What do I mean with that? Honesty. We have to be honest that all those structural changes will come along with some hardships for certain groups. Not everybody will be happy with those structural changes. We saw that, for example, in Germany after the reunification in 1990, between Western Germany and Eastern Germany. In those days, our Chancellor Kohl said, oh, this will take maybe 3 or 4 years, and then we have flourishing landscapes all over Germany. And this was not the case. Now we are in the year 31 of the unification in Germany, and still we have many regions, especially rural regions, who are still struggling with the structural change from a communist system to a market system in Germany. So this is the same thing with the transitional process here in the energy sector. And this is a responsibility of the state, of the society, to help those people who are affected by those structural changes. And not everybody, especially the elder people, will be able to be educated in a way that they can work in a new industry. We need early retiring. We need some monetary transition transfers. This is not about socialism. This is about a welfare state. Really, I must say that that's a typical social democratic program. I think that the current administration in Washington is dealing with that in a quite different way compared to the other administration which we had before that. So this is usual and this is necessary. The second thing is participation. I was really impressed by the presentations of the Navajo Nation, the moms, the Air Force of the moms, and of course Ms. Morales as well. It's all about participation. We don't have so many indigenous people in Germany, but nevertheless, We heard that from our mayor from Spremberg. They have this big commission where everybody's involved. And this is so important for the political process in the society that you have participation of all groups involved and affected. So this is another parallel I think we have. And last but not least, the question of political power. I was reminded when I listened to all those presentations that 40 years ago, we had this Green Party in Germany with the first representation in the parliament, in the regional parliament in Germany, the Green Party. And then they gained more and more influence, and they were part of the government, of the federal government, 20 years ago. And now again, they will be part of the government in Germany. And this was so important for our progress in the climate policy, that we had this Green Party in Germany. I don't know if you will have ever a Green Party in the United States, but I think it would be helpful. Not just the Republicans and the Democrats, some independents, but you need a green power in the political process. It's a bit difficult here in the United States because you have a different political system, but that was at least very important in Germany. In that sense, I think we made some progress in Germany during the last 40 years up to now. Yeah, those were my 3 remarks. Maybe rounded it up a bit, but thanks again. I'm looking forward for those discussions in Phoenix and in LA later this week. Thank you again, Max, for your participation and your perfect organization. At least what you could do. It's still still not easy with the hybrid formats. But what can we do? It was the best we could achieve, let's say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.